Another amine that can trigger migraines is tyramine, and it's found in some of the same foods: aged cheese, cured meat, smoked fish, beer, fermented food, and yeast extract. Tyramine directly increases the release of norepinephrine. This is kind of a fight or flight stress hormone that can trigger a migraine directly. So we want to stay away from these if we are prone to migraines. And it's possible that you could go back and eat some of these foods. Outside of the yeast extract, I can't see anything on this list that's going to be very healthy in any other way. Aspartame can trigger migraines. Now, the studies are showing that people had to drink 4+ cans of soda, getting 1,000 to 3,000 milligrams per day of aspartame before it triggered headaches. But there have been many reports of neurologic or behavioral symptoms with aspartame over the years. So you may want to avoid this type of artificial sweetener, such as NutraSweet, and see if that can reduce your migraines. Some people habitually drink a 6-pack over a day of diet sodas. And so if you're one of those people who do that, you might try switching to another type of drink that doesn't trigger your migraines. That could be a good idea. I mentioned MSG as a trigger, and the chief excitatory neurotransmitter is glutamate, and this is monosodium glutamate. So they're closely related. MSG can activate a neurotransmission pathway. Now, nitric oxide is put into cells to open up the blood vessels, actually to supply. When a nerve cell is used, it can signal to surrounding blood vessels to increase nitric oxide, which then opens the blood vessels and the nerve can get blood so it can regenerate itself. But these open blood vessels can contribute to inflammatory neuropeptides and lead to migraines. So it's important that you avoid MSG, and it can be confusing because it can be labeled differently on different packages. Packagers of food have learned that if they put MSG on a package, a lot of people won't buy it. So they use sneaky other labels. Again, if you find a food that triggers a migraine, stay away from it. Some of the names that can be used for MSG are hydrolyzed vegetable protein, or autolyzed yeast, sodium caseinate, yeast extract, textured vegetable protein, or calcium caseinate. A lot of these come from yeast or yeast derivatives. Again, from the journal Headache. Now, nitrite, I mentioned, is the red substance they add to meat to make it red and less deadly. It's a preservative. It can prevent botulism, and it adds kind of a smoked flavor. Some foods with nitrates, like sausages or cured meat or smoked fish, people can develop migraines within minutes to hours. So this can act rather quickly. So check ingredients for sodium nitrate, sodium nitrite, potassium nitrite, or nitrate. And again, nitric acid vasodilatation, which means the opening up of the arteries, can be the mechanism that this works. Nitrite is very harmful in many other ways too, as I mentioned. Good to stay away from red meat for that reason and quite a few others. Taking a look at some of these triggers, ice cream in children triggered 55% of them to get migraines. Alcohol, 43%. Alcohol has histamine, and beer contains also tyramine. Chocolate triggered 21%, and red meat triggered about 17% of people to get migraines. It has histamine, tyramine, and nitrite in it. Cheese has histamine and tyramine, and caffeine has none of these things but can trigger a migraine. MSG, 12%, aspartame. So you can get an idea how prevalent these are and how important they are for you to experiment with. Fish, if it's smoked, has all three: histamine, tyramine, and nitrite. And pickled food. My goal here in telling you about this is so that you can avoid foods that trigger your migraines and get fewer migraines, many fewer migraines, perhaps even no migraines. Red wine's a pretty common trigger for migraine, and it either can trigger a migraine within hours or minutes, or it can trigger it during a hangover. I mentioned that it contains tyramine, sulfites, and histamine. Well, I didn't mention the sulfites. There's something else in wine that can trigger headaches. Alcohol hangovers can definitely trigger, and that's possibly through the opening up of the blood vessels. So intracranial vasodilation is another way to say opening blood vessels in the brain. And inflammation can occur with increased cytokines and also leukotrienes, which are inflammatory, they're inflammatory substances made from the arachidonic acid found in animal fat. And of course, magnesium depletion. Any diuretic substance like red wine can deplete magnesium. Watch out for caffeine. It's real common, and it's found in prescription medications and many drinks. Excedrin and Anacin are famous for having caffeine. It increases vasoconstriction and releases excitatory transmitters, which can trigger a migraine. But when a migraine is ongoing, sometimes it can constrict the arteries and make it so that you release less inflammatory neuropeptides and get a milder headache. So you're going to have to experiment with yourself and see if this is helpful or harmful. In between sections here, I have soothing pictures for your brain so that we can reduce the excitatory neurotransmitter and increase the relaxing ones. This is Flat Rock Pool, which is about perhaps 150 yards from where I'm sitting right now on Maui. Again, my book, Mastering Migraines, available on drsteveblake.com. I hope that you can help. I want to mention that I've made my book under $10 so that you can get the ebook version without any financial suffering. And I want you to have these solutions to help your migraines. Now let's talk about some solutions. Ginger to treat migraines. This graph up here, the red and the tryptin. This is a blinded, randomized clinical trial with 100 migraine patients. Ginger worked as well as sumatriptan. They used 250 milligrams of ginger powder, and that's about a quarter teaspoon or 5 cents worth. Resulted in 44% of the people becoming migraine-free and 56% of the people having mild pain. So it reduced pain in everyone, and 44% of the people did not get a migraine. Sumatriptan can have side effects that range from mild to death. Ginger side effects included beneficial side effects, reduction of blood sugar, normalizing of blood pressure, and lowering of fats in the bloodstream. And it costs just pennies. Certainly something you could try. Now, ginger is a little bit spicy, and it's rare, but some people may react to it with a little overstimulation of their stomach. So make sure it works for you. It is a very common spice, so it's tried by a lot of people. But these numbers are amazing. 44% migraine-free from ginger powder, just a quarter teaspoon of the powder. How does this work? How can this possibly work? One thing that ginger does is it reduces calcitonin gene-related peptide. I've talked about these neuropeptides, and the neuropeptides are released with inflammation and can trigger the migraine. Ginger reduces inflammation and a pain similar to sumatriptan. Another way that ginger reduces inflammation is by reducing leukotrienes and pain-causing prostaglandins, and it does this by inhibiting COX-1. Now, COX-1 stands for cyclooxygenase 1, and this is exactly what's blocked by aspirin and Advil and many of the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory medications. So ginger works as an anti-inflammatory medication, even though it's a plant root. Feverfew has been used for centuries for migraine. It's not a new phenomenon for humans, after all. It's happened long before drugs were invented. My favorite type of trials are clinical trials. This one's a multi-center, double-blind, placebo-controlled study with 170 participants. And they used a Feverfew extract so that it was standardized amounts of Feverfew. And they used 6 milligrams 3 times a day of Feverfew. They did find a very significant and clinically relevant reduction in migraine frequency. And they found that Feverfew was well tolerated. Unusually, the American Academy of Neurology concluded that Feverfew is probably effective for migraine prevention. This is very rare because usually this Academy of Neurology, which is perhaps funded partially by pharmaceutical companies, does not commonly recommend medical plants instead of drugs. So I see that as a good sign. The mechanism by how Feverfew may prevent migraines could be related to the active ingredients, which are known as parthenolides, inhibiting platelet aggregation. They inhibit serotonin release from platelets and white blood cells. So Feverfew is anti-inflammatory. One way it works is through the inhibition of phospholipase A. So phospholipase A is an enzyme that our cells have. Our cell membranes are made up of phospholipids, and these have 2 fatty acids each, little tails sticking into the cell membrane. The fatty acids tend to be long-chain fatty acids, and in many people who eat animal fat, arachidonic acid is one of the predominant fatty acids. Arachidonic acid goes on to create inflammatory leukotrienes and pain-causing prostaglandins. So if less of this phospholipase A takes less of the arachidonic acid out of your cell membranes, then you have less eicosanoid synthesis, which means less inflammatory leukotrienes and less pain-causing prostaglandins. I'm trying to make this understandable and yet also science-based. So you don't need to remember phospholipase A, but you can remember that Feverfew has been shown to work for migraines. I'm going to talk about a different medical plant now, Butterbur. It's got a nice name. Psites hybridus, root extract is what is used in most of the studies. It's thought to act through calcium channel regulation. Calcium channels in nerves are very important for inflammation and excitation. Now, Butterbur was also found to inhibit leukotriene inflammation, just like Feverfew and several other things. These leukotrienes promote the inflammatory cascade associated with migraine. And one of the most effective ways to reduce leukotrienes is to reduce animal fat intake. I take in none myself. Undesirable pyrrolizidine alkaloids are removed in some commercially available preparations, and I would only recommend that you take Butterbur that has the pyrrolizidine alkaloids removed. Please do not take any that don't say that they've removed the pyrrolizidine alkaloids, because over time they can lead to liver toxicity, and we certainly don't want any harm. In a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial using real humans, 50 milligrams of Butterbur extract twice daily had a significantly reduced number of migraine attacks and migraine days per month. This is just what we want. Another randomized trial of 245 patients, they used 75 milligrams twice daily instead of 50, and it decreased the number of monthly migraine attacks. So Butterbur may be an effective tool that you can consider if you're getting migraines that are disrupting your life and are painful and hard on your career and your family and everything else. One more test in children. They took 109 children and adolescents with migraines, and 77% of all of these children reported a reduction in migraine frequency of at least 50%. This is pretty powerful stuff, even though it is a medical plant. I regret to say that in America, neurologists and general practitioners tend not to recommend or prescribe any medical plant whatsoever. In Europe, they do. In China, they do. In Africa and many other places in the world, they do recommend medical plants. They're, of course, much cheaper than drugs, more available, often have fewer side effects. You may consider this even though your neurologist may not have had time or training in medical plants to help you with this one. Again, more of these plants can be found in my Mastering Migraines Prevention and Relief book found on drsteveblake.com. Another plant, Ginkgo, is a favorite. I use Ginkgo in a clinical trial on dementia that it's called the Hawaii Dementia Prevention Trial. You can actually look this up and get the paper. I was lead author of the paper too, and I ran the trial with a large team. We used more than ginkgo in the trial, of course, but ginkgo by itself is very helpful because it opens up blood vessels in the brain. In this trial, they use the ginkgo biloba terpenes with a little coenzyme Q10 and vitamin B2. I mentioned vitamin B2 before, that's riboflavin, for 4 months. The number of migraines dropped by 2/3 and 42% became migraine-free. No more migraines. It's a pipe dream for people with migraines, but perhaps it could happen. Another study with the same formula for 3 months cut migraine frequency in half in school children. And the studies are listed below, and in Neurological Sciences has reported both of these studies, one in 2009 and one in 2011. Lavender has a lovely smell, and they put 10 drops of lavender in water, the lavender oil, and it reduced headache severity. At the start of the trial, the headaches were the same in the lavender people and the control people. After the first month, they'd gone down from 5 a month to 4 a month. In the third month, they'd gone down from actually, excuse me, I'm comparing controls with treatment. They started at 7 migraine per month. That's just too many. It's very disruptive. And then the group with the lavender went down to 4 after the first month and went down to just over 3 by the third month. So that's pretty good. Cutting the frequency in half. And there have also been studies with lavender oil inhalation, where you put a few drops of lavender oil, perhaps in warm water, and inhale the steam. And that can be relief in a very quick and pleasant manner. The Neuroscience Nutrition Foundation was established for us to be able to devote our time to this type of research. We're not studying drugs, so we're not getting funding by drug companies. And we depend on you to fund the Neuroscience Nutrition Foundation. If it's possible for you to donate, neurosciencenutrition.org would appreciate it. We would all appreciate it, so that we can continue finding good solutions that are never harmful and well-researched for all the neurologic disorders.